All right, everybody, we are live. Yep, we're good to go. Welcome to the live stream, Millstone Self-Reliance Group. One of your hosts, Mark, over there is your other host,
Blake.
And then down below us is a very special guest we've had on before, Clint from Nemesis Cameras. Say hi, Clint.
I'm back.
He's back, boys and girls. Yeah, actually, is that when you're flying your F-15, right up into the UFO, and you're like, "I'm back, motherfucker," right. Whatever that scene was, but.
I'm back.
Yeah. Or no, does he say that, or does he say "remember me"? Or I can't remember what he says.
I can't remember. This has been a long time for that movie.
That's Independence Day. If you don't know what we're talking about, yeah, he flies.
Probably the best scene in the movie, actually.
Yeah. Well, there weren't very many good saving graces in that movie. Hey, we'll see how this goes tonight, but this is a continuation of last week. We're not doing the first 72 hours. We've already went through, thoughts, ideas, shoot, move, communicate, medicate, food, fire, water, shelter. We've already talked about that. We really spent last week just trying to lay out the argument that, the war that you don't know you're already in. And then if you see the thumbnail for tonight, we're talking about the chairs against the wall. And look at this. We're going to be getting a special guest coming on. He's been here before as well, but Patrick just joining in. Patrick, can you hear us?
Hey, what's up, gents? How are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure, we got you loud and clear. You're 5x5. So anyway, we're just doing our little intro here. But so Patrick is kind of bopping from work, but I wanted to get him on here because we've also had Patrick on in the past, and he's very uniquely positioned to talk about some of the kind of modern day, again, obviously he's got considerations, constraints, but he's come on. Patrick was talking about Tren de Agua way before that was making the news, with all the shit that's going on there. So, of the three of us or the four of us, Patrick's still kind of the one of us who's, more in the fight. And so I wanted to definitely be able to get him on to have his perspective. But really what we're just doing here tonight is kind of just wrapping it all up. And the chair is against the wall. If you can't identify the terrain upon which we are all currently deployed, I just don't know what else to say to you. And I'll leave these guys for their own opinions on how they want to add to it. But, I could still show you some things. We can talk about stuff, but you really have an incredibly short window of time. That's just my humble opinion. And, just as my segue, and then I'll open it up to everybody else. But so again, we were talking about, the League of Shadows. That's kind of one of the scenarios we were talking about. And your government possibly being the entity that takes away your freedom or comes for your very soul. And just by way of I just wrote this down. One page. I wrote this down just in the 5 minutes before we went live here tonight. If you are just looking around and think your government, the American government, has your interest. See, I didn't even cover financial things. I just totally forgot about Social Security and Medicaid and our deficit. And we should talk about our deficit, and our debt. But if you think your government has your interests at heart, either side of that political spectrum, I've got a bridge to nowhere to sell you. And some things you've been sold and you probably already forgot. Billions of dollars sent in cash on pallets sent to Iran under the Obama era in the middle of the night. Fast and Furious with Holder, both the Obama and Clinton era. Relations with Russia. You guys remember the hot mic? Oh, don't worry. Once, I get reelected, there's a lot more things I can do. Do you remember Skokovo? Do you remember the Great Reset? Do you remember all that kind of stuff? How do those people suddenly turn on them, right? What's going on there? Clinton specifically. Emails, the PP dossier, Libya, Benghazi, FBI Mueller, her fucking server. Okay. Shit, on that note, just throw him under the bus. Let's just talk about Joe Biden and 10% for the big guy and all the money over there to Burisma. And his kid is not in jail for things that you and I would have been thrown in jail for without a hesitation, without a moment's doubt. Other issues, the Hawaii fires, the Vegas shooter, trans shooters, Ukraine, Wuhan and gain of function, 10% for the big guy, the border, illegals, crime, voting. I don't give a shit what your viewpoints are on illegal immigration. If you're not an American citizen, you don't get to vote. That's just how it fucking works. And yet we've got people who think that no, illegals should be voting in our elections, our national elections. On that note, I'll throw my state under the bus. If you're not an American citizen, the Constitution doesn't apply to you. Sorry, it just doesn't. We are now hiring people in the Minneapolis Police Department who will exercise legal authority and violence over you. They will carry guns, and they're not even American fucking citizens. You see where this is kind of going? If you think the government's, hey, we're from the government, we're here to take care of you. Good luck with that, right? But you can't carry guns. FBI will be showing up at your house for a mean tweet. But some illegal alien, somebody who's not an American citizen is going to be carrying guns and enforcing U.S. laws in the state of Minnesota. Cocaine at the White House. The illegal storage and possession of classified documents at Biden's house. Cocaine in the White House. I already said that. A dead body at Obama's house. A male prostitute at Pelosi's house. An illegal server in the Clinton house. Foreign bribes and money in Democrat Menendez's house. But after all that, hey, there's not a single bit of coverage. No one talks about it in the media. But, we're going to go ahead and raid Trump's house. Like, does this make any sense to anybody? And that's my hot mic opener right there. I'm obviously a little pissed off. We're fucked, boys and girls. Even, if you want to vote for Trump, which obviously is in my humble opinion, it's either communism or a last chance of pulling this off and saving the republic. But if but Trump, even if Trump gets elected, we are not anywhere out of this fucking fight. The government, the deficit, the national debt, the corruption, the graft, the rot has gotten so deep. After last week's episode, and this is where I'll shut up, Blake and I can't remember who it was that we were talking to, but God, was it you, Clint? But anyway, it came up, the whole conversation. What if this is all about depopulation or population control? Like, what if this is even more sinister than what we think it is? Now that you could put a tinfoil hat on your head for, but everything I just said is 100% truth. What in the F? WTF? You think it's going to somehow get better in November? All right. Who wants to jump in on that?
Well, I think part of it is it makes sense if you look through the lens of it's all by design and it's actually trying to, bring the beast down with 1,000 different cuts. And when you look at the totality of what's happened over the last 4 or 5 election cycles, it's just kind of progressively sped up and sped up and sped up. And now with what's happening, I mean, even just in the last week from when we spoke last time to today, I mean, there's been several more major events, both natural in origin and man-made. And now, you look at those events too, and they're going to put more stress on the system, and you're going to start seeing people move around. I mean, these, like the BioLab in Atlanta, I think was the name of the company, was BioLab, that just went up. Depending on what's burning there, that might be one of those areas you can't inhabit anymore. Palestine, when you go back to the train derailment that took place, these are creating effectively areas of no-go zones or area denial devices that are taking place. And you put enough stress on the system, enough of these things happen, and you've got your own populace even acting as migrants running.
Well, and that's a good point. And I'll turn this over maybe to Clint, because I think you got your pulse down south a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But the reports I've seen that there's an area in North Carolina where there's one road that's open. All the infrastructure for a huge chunk is reliant on one road right now. So to Blake's point, these things are fragile and frail, and our presidential candidate is out in, Hollywood, hobnobbing it with movie stars, as opposed to trying to be there and take care of this, already 100 people have unfortunately lost their life. But Clint, have you heard that it's that bad logistically that there's one major hub that's still left in North Carolina? Can you confirm or deny, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hearing. And just recently, as I was kind of talking about, I worked for DOD and Department of State, and then the disaster response companies. So we would go in for these floods and hurricanes, tornadoes, so on and so forth. I was just recently up in Hazard County, Kentucky, where we had the same thing with these floods up there. Going in there trying to set up places for the people that live in these hollers down in the creeks, back in the mountains, and they've got nothing. That
froze up there a little bit.
thing away that they have. Yeah. So you good?
We got
So,
you now. You froze up there for a little bit.
Yeah. So was up there for that disaster camp. And now that I'm looking at these photos up there around Asheville, literally every interstate that's coming into Asheville is all cut off. I'm seeing other people on social media that are getting connections up there. All power's out. And they were probably the last ones thinking, oh, there's a little tropical storm, category 3. Okay, now it's hitting landfall. We won't get any of that. And the thing went up there and just dumped on them. They probably weren't remotely even expecting it. And I suppose last thought on that, running disaster camps and coming from a military background, my comfort zone is a heightened level of, security. I live in that space. I feel comfortable there. I'm always thinking, are my batteries charged? Where are my lamps? How many MRE boxes that I got? That's just how I live. So going back to what you were saying, Mark, if you're not prepared at this point, we're there. We're here now. You got to start. Literally last night, and I think I was sending Mark pictures while I was doing it, I had a couple of containers full of my medical supplies, and I completely restocked my aid bags, got them all squared away, got rid of anything I didn't need. You need to be sitting down, taking stock of what your assets are, and having them ready, know where they're at, check them out. Whether it's old bad gas in containers, food supply, medical supplies, and anything you may need for your family with emergency medicine that you may need, like diabetic stuff. So just thoughts. I'll toss it back over to Mark and you can go with it from there.
Well, I want to actually bring it over to Patrick because, we kind of, by hook or crook or whatever, it doesn't matter, but we're sitting here talking about the natural disasters taking place in the Southeast. And Patrick, I'd be curious to hear what kind of reports you're seeing about criminal activity already transpiring, because even though that's trying to be suppressed, that information is starting to come out about criminal activity taking advantage of this and like raiding houses and stuff. Is that popping up anywhere on your radar, Patrick, for what you do? And yes or no, and whatever direction you want to go with that, because I want to come back over to you to Tren de Aragua.
Yeah. Yep. No, I haven't. In fairness, I have not been in the office doing that kind of stuff recently. I was out on training, but I'm seeing a lot of open source stuff that kind of gets like repeated, in our channels that, identifies that Tren de Aragua and other what are referred to as SATGs or South American theft groups that basically people that come to the country to commit organized crime, whether it's raiding retail stores, robbing homes, stealing cars, that type of thing. So that they are active, and I have seen that stuff. It's pretty disgusting. Back to Clint's point, when you're looking at natural disasters, right? So I always look at it this way, like, hey, as soon as you start hearing any type of like weather report that like something bad might be coming through your area, whether it be like tornado conditions, blizzards, wherever you live, you've got something, right? I almost view that as like in the military, like a warning order, like, hey, here we go. And this is like your last chance. If you don't have that stuff, you better find a way to get it quick, and then have your exit plan too, in case you're unable to stick around your home or where you live. So, having those discussions ahead of time. And we've kind of, I think we beat that one to death, but it's funny how every time this comes up, it's like it's fresh and it's new, but it's, in truth, it's the same story over and over again. It's just a matter of what the flavor is,
Blake, I know do you want to add to that? Because you were kind of commenting on just like what Patrick just said. We just keep adding more flavors to the dish. Like we got more flavors in this dish than Baskin Robbins right now, man.
Well, and that's the problem. We've moved beyond Baskin Robbins flavors, and now we're in like shit and puke flavors. Like we're in the really, really not good flavors anymore. And they just
people with weird fetish flavors.
Yeah, and it's just like this big bowl of awful that just kind of like it's all you can eat. Well, I don't want to eat any of it. Yeah, but it's all you can eat. And I think Angry Viking, he brought it up, man. We've got the East Coast ports and Gulf ports are going to probably be going down because of strikes, in talking about being prepared as best as you can. We went out and I basically bought out the supply of the type of formula that my son can have. And, because I saw those shortages and I was buying for friends back not but a couple of years ago in the time period, the thing that we aren't supposed to be able to say, but COVID. And, you know, it's one of those things is if it runs out, especially if it comes over from overseas, man, good luck. And if you need it, you know, make sure you got it. So it's, and this is getting crazy. It really, really is, because we're already seeing a small amount of shortages here, but you're seeing that herd panic that you kind of saw at the early stage of COVID. You're seeing that in people's eyes again right now.
Well, I think we could even add, you know, to that. I mean, I think, you know, whatever's been in the water or whatever caused that herd mentality, you know, 4 years ago, it still persists with people because people, you know, I said it way back in the day, you know, like it was going to make good people even better. And then some people would become a little good and others would maybe stay on the fence. But if you were on the fence, you were going to probably turn into an even worse type of human being. And you just look around society today, you know, it's like there's no civility. You know, the things we think are acceptable, social discourse, you can't, you know, if you put the wrong person's political sign in your front yard, you got people breaking your shit or knocking your hat off in a restaurant or accosting you or spitting on you. Like, you know, just the violence and the rhetoric. And then back to my larger point, you know, again, I could have like easily just kept going, making the list. And, you know, and media and social media will call you the bad guy for pointing out, like, you know, to Patrick, you know, like who works in this space and knows it intimately about, you know, the criminal activity. Oh, no. That's been debunked. That's not true. What, just because you say it doesn't mean it's true. Like, you know, like, no, this evil exists. And, you know, I guess I'm just finding and searching a way to keep bringing it back to my point. If you think this government is going to do anything and pull its head out of its ass in the next 30 to 60 days, I got a bridge to nowhere to sell you.
Yeah. Amen to that. So on that note, on anything government related, I think this has gone on for years. I've had this opinion, and I know you have too, Mark, and Clint, you've probably seen it as well. Anything government related is not ever, it's never going to be the most efficient thing. It's not going to be effective. Many times it's going to be extremely incompetent, right? And that's what I see on my side of things. Once again, here's my caveat. All opinions that I say are my opinions alone. So, but I see a lot of people that are not, either they don't do their job because either they're lazy, or more often than not, people that don't do their job because they're supervisors and overall managers all the way up to like secretary level. They don't really care.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's what you have with Border Patrol. I mean, they can cry and scream all day long. We need more resources. We need more people. If you don't use those people in an effective manner, you're going to get what you get now. We're just going to have more taxpayer money allotted to facilitating that, right? That's it. Law enforcement, you know, has been beat up for so long. If you have to call 911, depending on where you live, you know, guess what? That's a ticking clock the minute you need it, right? You don't need it like 5 minutes from now. You need it right now. And reality is law enforcement, depending on where you live, is not going to show up on time. And then the thing I like to throw out there as well, you don't know who's going to show up. You don't know if it's going to be some super out of shape guy or somebody who doesn't want to do their job. So that's why I make a strong push to becoming, you know, independently effective on your own. I think that the common citizen, if they start looking at this in a very objective way and seeing, hey, here, this is what actually occurs, I think they would take things a lot more serious. But it's an easy button to say, oh, I'll call 911, or, you know, on an emergency, somebody will come and help me. Not going to happen. Not going to happen.
That's a great point. I'm gonna jump in there, Mark, on that real quick. You know, they have this thing. You guys will know what it is. I'm sure some people watching will know what this is. Tactical patience. You know, when these things start going sideways, you need to slow down and start thinking and stop being in a hurry. We talked about this just briefly before we went live. You know, we're all still conducting our lives in a manner that like there's going to be a tomorrow. You know, you have a business, you have a family, you have to take care of the things that you got to take care of immediately. As we watch everything start to crumble around us, I can just imagine all the highways trying to get into Asheville right now. You get in a hurry. And just like Patrick was saying, all the law enforcement is tasked out doing something, blocking highways. And bring it up, I just saw on social media a little while ago, they had 8 pictures of gang members that were up already casing areas up around the Asheville area. I know that just got brought up, but now they're already putting pictures. There was 8 of them that they had pictures of already that were out, looking to steal, do whatever they're going to do. So that tactical patience, you may as well slow down, make sure your supplies are good, and start focusing on what's right around you. And like I said, have that tactical patience. When things start going haywire, slow down.
Yeah, take a breath. And I'm sure Clint and I have talked and shared a couple stories, and I'm sure maybe I've said them over here on some of these podcasts where there was Centerline or Mission Critical. But I mean, that's just, it really is. And that's what you hear people talk about, take a breath, slow down for a second. Like, it literally can save you and everybody else around you, because 2 seconds is a long effing time. 1,000. That was a breath. 2,000. Get your thoughts, your wits together, formulate that plan. That's a lot of freaking time, and then execute, as opposed to just running around with your head chopped off. Blake, I kind of want to bring that over to you and Patrick on that, because I kind of want to go where Clint was just saying, because as we left off last time, talking about unconventional warfare, and I can see us circling the wagons back around to it, which is the criminal activity, Tren de Agua. Hey, we're the government. We're good at creating solutions to the problems we've caused. They're not. They're good at creating problems, and they're not good at creating solutions. But that almost appears to be what we're being set up for. Like, hey, look at all these horrible things. Well, we've got the solution. And no one will point out, yeah, but you're the one who caused the problem.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the thing, is as we continue to see that cultural homogeny breakdown, that group of individuals that's going to share the same values that our neighbors used to share, being on the street and already acting as highwaymen within the first 24 hours of a massive disaster in the United States. Well, holy crap, we've got a serious problem on our hands, because how do a people pull together when half of the people that are in that area don't have the same shared core principles? Politics be damned, that's irrelevant to the point that we used to all be able to call ourselves Americans and try to help each other out when there was a time of need for it. Now we see that being exploited and really broken down. And, be it from Chicago, out in Colorado with the issues that were going on there, we're going to just keep seeing this speed up. We're going to see more and more of these issues. And, I don't really like thinking about where that's going to go. But I think it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. And I think the big catalyst that's going to really pop it off is going to be this election cycle, because there's a lot of people. Oh, go ahead.
Well, just before we bring it back over to you, I just don't want to go too far afield, something you said, and then the same for Patrick and Clint. But just this Minneapolis thing, they're hiring non-U.S. citizens to be cops. And one of the female officers, and of course, we put that whole conversation to the side, but a female officer, look, I don't give a fuck about her ethnicity. She's not an American. It just so happens she's Hispanic, right? I could give a shit less. You're an American or you're not, right? I got a gap between my teeth that makes me Scandinavian and a bump on my nose. We all got our freaking things, right? But here she is, and she doesn't talk about being an American. She doesn't talk about being a Minnesotan. She doesn't talk about being proud to have lived, to be from the Twin Cities. She talks about people that look like her. That's why she's doing it. And it goes just to what you said right there, Blake. And I just didn't want to go too far afield from it. Like, I would have had a hard time arguing if she would have been like, look, I'm so proud to have this chance to serve my country in this capacity, even though I'm, technically not an American citizen. This is what I'm working. None of that. It was all about people who look like me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the thing. It produces enclaves, these different groups that will not homogenize. They will not, become Americans or civically minded individuals. And when you start having too much of that, let's call it what it is. It's colonization. And we have colonies with entirely different ethos inside of the United States right now that are diametrically opposed to the concept of freedom, self-protection, liberty. Like these are absolutely foreign concepts. And honestly, they're growing by the day because of the lackluster control that we have over both our southern and our northern border. And they're being told a large volume of them coming over is that you will get benefits in the United States. You're going to make more money here and you can ship it overseas, and you're going to get, cell phones right when you come in, $2,000 a month, bonuses for buying whatever crap you want because we're just giving this to you. So we're not attracting, the best of the best. We're not brain draining the rest of the world like we used to do when we were a meritocratic society. Instead, we're opening up the doors to the dredges and going, come on in and, pardon my French, fuck everything we have up, please. We don't like our people anyway.
Wow. So Angry Viking Veteran is from Minnesota. Never met the gentleman, but he just chimed in also, like on that note, another comment was her community, not the community. So that's even more to what your point right there, Blake. And then kind of taking that and bringing it back down to Clint and Patrick to either go from, the law enforcement, legal, criminal, drug, terrorist interdiction side of it, or because both gentlemen have the same, a very similar kind of knowledge and breadth. Definitely Clint is the full-fledged, certified snake eater amongst the group, but this is nothing, abnormal or unknown to myself and Patrick as well, or the unconventional warfare side of it, which is what I was trying to get at last week. Clint, Patrick, whichever direction you guys want to go or how you want to respond. Because I think that's part of the ultimate point. I mean, isn't that what you would be doing? I mean, whether from psychological operations perspective or from unconventional warfare perspective, you're already infiltrating key institutions. I mean, you could make that argument that many of our key institutions have been infiltrated a long time ago. If you want to look at it from the Chinese perspective, from China as a nation state infiltrating our key institutions, that's been going on, since the Obama era. I mean, really, actually how about the Clinton era, if you take it back a little bit farther, but I digress. I'm rambling. Clint, Patrick, there's just so much. I just don't know. I mean, there's so much evidence, guys. I just don't even know what to say anymore.
I was not aware that that Minneapolis has already done that. I know there's been discussions in some states about like opening that up. I didn't know that it already occurred. So First off, that's very horrifying. But to add some background to it, I like to give my piece and then kind of bounce this off Clint. And I want you to think of what I'm about to say in terms of another country, because it's starting to kind of look that way, right? So question number one is, when you have somebody who's a non-U.S. citizen that's taking a law enforcement position, what oath did they take? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So like if I was a police officer, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. If they take that same oath, but they don't have any loyalty to it because they're not a U.S. citizen, that means nothing. So right off the bat, you're kind of like in this like shaky area before the person even goes on their first shift, right? Secondly, when you and I've seen this before too, because I worked in some major urban areas, I've seen small municipalities that don't have a very big budget, and they would hire people for a very low pay. Now, when I'm saying low pay, I'm talking like $15, $20 an hour to be a police officer to get a badge and a gun. What do you think that produces? It doesn't produce a professional police officer who's got the concerns of the community to protect and serve the people that they swore to. Instead, it generally kind of like delves into, hey, guess what? We'll be overwatched for criminal activity and we'll make our extra money on the side. So you've got that, right? I mean, it's like the corruption you see in Africa and, former Soviet bloc places just run awry happening here. Now, I think the challenge for American, like law-abiding, God-fearing American citizens is to start to look at, hey, what is going to be a point where I will break from, just being a rule follower and start actually defending myself and my community? Because for me, that would be one of them. If I saw a police officer pulling Overwatch on somebody that just tried to commit a home invasion, everybody's fair game in that scenario for me, right? But it takes a deliberate psychological shift to say, hey, number one, we're aware of this stuff, but then also, hey, what is the situation where I will actually take action to defend myself and family and community, right? So I'll kick it over to Clint on that.
Well, that's a great point. No, I'll just bring up a point that I had a couple nights ago. Something that I'm seeing with here, and it's prevalent everywhere right now. People are short on money. Everything's costing more. So the petty theft is starting to get really, really out of control. Got a text from a group text within my residential area. Had a pastor that I know that lives close to me. His daughter's a detective here in town, and she knows exactly what's happening around this area. And there's been a large a surge in home invasions and shed break-ins because people are looking for things to pilfer to go sell on marketplace or whatever. So making that concerted effort to change that posture, immediately, lights that I have, floodlights around my house. I actually have a big light down by my shed that lights up my whole backyard. Thieves don't like lights. So you turn them lights on, keep it light outside, dark inside, so you can see out, they can't see in. But that you got to start changing your posture when you start seeing, we're, from what I understand, 70 to 80 law enforcement officers short in our medium-sized city. So I mean, that's a substantial amount of patrol officers that we just don't have. So they're overtaxed, and it's taken a long time for this smaller theft thing. So it gets to the point where you really got to change your posture and keep that head on a swivel and start tightening things down. Keep things locked up. Don't leave them open. Keep the lights on if you have to, things like that.
So if you've got everybody in society hating each other, and not really focused on the real fight, and then you've destroyed our institutions or debilitated them severely, to include major man crisis issues. And I've heard that, and I've still got a bunch of friends in law enforcement. I've heard that, multiple times, what you just said there, Clint. So doesn't this then factor in, isn't this the kind of conditions you're trying to prep? Because again, you want that terrain, that battlefield to be advantage you, disadvantage, your opponent. Well, that just would add right to it, because law enforcement, and I even taught a class for a number of years to law enforcement students on terrorism, look, you'd get some, aspiring police officer saying, terrorism, what does that have to do with me? And I'm like, are you? And I obviously was showing them and talking about case studies and everything, but I'm like, how do you not get that in domestically? You're probably going to be the first line of defense. Look at San Bernardino. Look at so many every place where we've actually had domestic terrorism take place here on U.S. soil. But if you then minimize how many cops you even have, then you have even fewer people who are even going to be fulfilling that role. And then back to other things, those cops are going to be stressed out. They're not paid well, or maybe they're paid too much. They're not really doing the hard lifting, or as Patrick said, they don't even want to do that. They'd rather harass you for too much tint on your windows. So we're creating a situation in which the resources that we have that should be used against to combat these type of issues are nowhere to be seen. Last comment, just, it's anecdotal on my side, but, I do business with Jack from Black Scout. I was watching one of his videos this morning when I was going through my emails, and he was talking, he's from the Carolinas, and he was talking about exactly that. In the middle of all this natural disaster, he's barely even seen a cop the whole time, because as you kind of pointed out, Clint, they're being tasked with so many other damn things right now, right? So does that fit into that in a way? Do you want to add to that?
Let me grab this, and I'm going to punt it back over to Patrick, because you just said we're creating this scenario. The scenario's been created already, and I'm not correcting you. You'll agree with me. The situation has already been created. Whether it's a natural disaster or, skepticism in the support from the government, what they're doing, local, state, federal, it's all questionable right now. And then you have this massive demographic of people that have come in here breaking the law right off the bat, that have been promised things, and they're not going to get it. So now they automatically feel like I was brought here under false pretenses, and everything's free game.
That's a damn good point right there.
Because you brought me in here and now I don't get a hotel room, and my $15,000 is wore out of my credit card and my EBT cards wore out. Now I'm coming for your stuff because I was promised something.
That's a damn good point. That's very well thought out right there. Patrick, I see you smiling. You're already thinking it too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's spot on. So compare and contrast this to Hurricane Katrina down in New Orleans back in, what was that, 2005? That was at a time when we didn't have all these theft groups and foreigners roaming around the country that have a criminal background. What you still had police officers and first responders that, instead of actually doing their job, hey man, guess what? Their families live in that community too, so they would just disappear. They would just not show up for shifts and that type of thing, and that created this massive issue with looting and robbery, and the worst of humanity came out to the point where. And I believe that's where Blackwater got a domestic assignment to help and bring law and order back to that area as best they could. We are facing something way worse than that, because now there's a bad look at law enforcement. We do have these terrorist and criminal organizations. Because I bring up terrorism because let's also not forget Operation Allies Welcome. Those folks are still around, and so. Guess what? If I'm going to be looked at, in a negative light, I'm going to go help my family and get the hell out of here. Why should I stick around for a shift? Because God knows what's going to happen. In state is that, guess what? The average citizens that are also dealing with this, you're on your own for your own security, and that's not what people are used to thinking about. They're used to relying on the taxpayer money to come and help them, and they're not getting their money's worth. So this is why I think that, again, this group that we brought together and the community that listens into this stuff needs to take it seriously and spread the message, because guys, nobody's coming. It literally is just us. So, hey, build these communities and these little groups together now. I mean, if you're in North Carolina and along the Eastern Seaboard, it's kind of too late. It should have happened already. And this is not me standing on a soapbox saying, I told you so. That's not the case. It just illustrates the need for everyone else. If you're not in that current situation, hey, hit the gas and let's start getting a little more serious about this stuff. Because I think as we get closer and closer to election time, you're going to see more and more of these things, not natural disasters, but you're going to see more and more of these criminal activities and these different scenarios, which could lead, local and state governments to say, that's it, folks. We're going to, issue an emergency order here, that now we're going to be voting remotely and this type of stuff. I mean, don't count that out at all.
Blake, I don't know if you saw AVV's comments, but they tied up nicely to what Clinton Patrick just said. Yeah. Everything from, well, here, I'll just pop them up for everybody can see it. Like most people, to Patrick's point and Clint's point, most people aren't ready for this. They've not experienced it, and look, and that's not a dig. God bless you for not having experienced that. Like that was one of my big things. My colleagues were like, oh, stupid, like, dude, that's why we're out here doing it. You know how much I wish I was back there raising a family and, and just being pissed off because my beer was a little warm. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. That's what we're out here doing. But, and then the other AVV is it crazy, is this just done so we have to use the military on U.S. soil? And people say, well, that's illegal. Well, no, it's posse comitatus. There are definitely ways it can be done, and your National Guard's one of them. But Blake, I don't know if you want to kind of address those and we bring it back around to Clinton Patrick, because we're starting to warm up to the idea of actual boots on the ground, whether they're ours or, to my bigger part, is I don't even think that, we haven't even seen what's about to start happening. And we're starting to see it from, as Patrick so correctly calls it, these criminal, what is that phrase you just use again for like the structured criminal, like the Trinidad Aragua and those guys, these criminal elements that are breaking in and stealing stuff. What was that term you used?
They refer to them as South American theft groups, SATG.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Blake, where do you want to go with that?
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's the thing is, one, I mean, it is nice that Americans aren't used to it, but man, we're going to have to probably learn, because it does seem like we are degrading into, in a lot of ways, in a lot of areas, our country, a third world nation, a failed nation state. And, we're seeing this especially in certain parts of the larger cities in the U.S. So if that's really truly the case, then holy crap, man, you got to get it together and start preparing and relying on yourself and the community, like we've talked about so stinking much, is a few people that you can trust, because the government is not going to help, because it looks like the government is actually desiring this very thing. And putting the boots on the ground, man, I mean, that's the big concern out of all of it too. And in essence, a lot of these groups are already a form of boots on the ground. They're just shock troops. They're chaos agents. They're splinter groups, you know. And the problem is like we were talking about last week, was if there's a battlefield to be fought, you're going to fight on it. And trying to wedge communities apart, trying to break them down in the small areas, you know, even if it's just a consistent mugging of the little old lady when she's coming back with her groceries, you know, I mean, that stuff breaks down a community. Well, when you amplify that 100-fold, like we're seeing now, where it's actually established gangs in these cities starting to go against these foreign gangs, this is going to lead to, in essence, tribal warfare again on a very large scale with relatively armed individuals inside the United States. I mean, and that's just one small little aspect of what's unfolding right now. Oh,
Clint.
Wow. The last comment that came in, what was it? Viking.
Yeah.
Well, I've said this for a long time, and I've had lots of people ask my opinion about military, law enforcement, first line of defense. Yeah. I think these things were all done, I feel, have been done on purpose to demoralize the police, to leave us so extremely short with local, state, federal, not just federal, but local state police. And then we have a federal law enforcement that's starting to get questionable, that we're all starting to wonder, why can't we get any answers out of these people? You know, why can't we get any straight answers? Why does it take months to find out how many bullets were fired at who and where were these people standing? It's unbelievable that we're still at this point not knowing what went on at Butler, you know. And I'll tell you, sorry, my mind's wandering now. I mean, I'm just south of Atlanta, so we see this big chemical thing go off. We hear it's a sprinkler that went bad, got some water and some chemicals that were, you know, activated by water. We don't know what's going on up there. You know, it could have been anything. We brought this up and we were talking about it before we went live. You know, it doesn't seem like the information's getting out honestly enough. So it leaves me questioning everything. You know, you get skeptical about everything you hear. So my point to that is, you know, I've always been of the impression they have done a wonderful job of divide and conquer. And that permeates through all of our law enforcement units, departments. It's in the military, you know, so we're on real unstable ground here, where we're going to see things fracture right down the center, progressive, left, right, you know, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. It's very unnerving when you don't have enough law enforcement officers and you think the military is going to come in and fix this, you know. No, I don't think so. I think our military would fracture.
Well, before we bring this over to you, Patrick, I mean, you know, to Clint's point right there, and this is what I've been, you know, saying for a while, which is, you know, if I was your enemy, your adversary, you know, and Clint's been on with, you know, with a bunch of episodes now, and can't remember if you heard when we talked about Carver and, you know, but like, you just look at the targets, you know, no one, you know, and again, just to that point, the media doesn't talk about this stuff anymore. East Palestine's been forgotten, you know, all the chicken and beef and poultry facilities that have been blown up, and chemical facilities and pharmaceutical facilities and X, Y, and Z. And then you look at all this stuff, and I'm just thinking unconventional warfare and Carver. I'm just like, this would be so easy, you know, Clint. I mean, you know, like, and especially because, you know, this isn't like, you know, we're doing some clandestine, you know, cross-border operation through a source network, you know, like, you know, Al-Qaeda was running against us in Western Iraq. No, this is like, you know, just coming right across the border and being, as we've all said, not only being ushered in, but be given like logistical and material support. You know, like, my God, you just be like, holy shit, this is so easy. Patrick, do you want to add to that? I mean, because again, I'm just I'm just sitting here like so afraid that, gosh, I just don't want to be right. I want to be so wrong, but we haven't even seen it yet, is what I'm thinking, and it's getting really bad, as Blake kind of pointed out.
Well, we're seeing snippets here and there, but I think you're right. And I generally don't like to fearmonger, but when you put all this stuff together, when you started the podcast off by going down the line, I mean, you know, hey, I remember each one of those things, and all together, when you say them out loud, it's sobering. You know, you remember times like, you know, back in like the 90s, even 80s, where like if one of these things happened, it'd be like a news story for the better part of a year. Now the news cycles just move so fast, you know. Okay, oh, hey, I forgot about that. Well, maybe we shouldn't forget about things like that. Anyway, it's all adding up, and it just comes back to like people, you know, actually taking their own security safely. And this is something that, you know, one of the trainers I've worked through says, and I like it a lot. But in your own emergency, you're your own first responder. I mean, like, you're there right now. It's your emergency. You're going to have to learn how to deal with that, or at least embrace it. And that starts with a psychological mindset of saying, hey, look, I will not be a victim. I don't need help. Building that like confident capability in whatever it is you're going to do. I think that the time for doing that is a little bit past. But anybody listening on here, if you're a former military member, especially if you got deployment time, if you're, you know, a law enforcement officer, a firefighter, a medical professional, hey, build these communities now and reach out, because you never know when it's going to happen, right? So I've taken several oaths throughout my career, and I take them all very seriously. So I'm actively, aggressively looking for reasons to intervene on something. So I don't view it as like, oh, we're victims and we're doomed. I think as long as we're communicating and as long as we're preparing and encouraging those around us to prepare, I think that's the best case scenario. But just like anybody else, everybody has to take their own path. And if you don't take the right path and crisis hits you, you might suffer the consequences. So again, not to be a fearmonger, but all these, any government organization that you're going to count on, you probably shouldn't be doing that, right? You should probably count on yourself first.
Yeah. No point counting on the people to solve the problem they created. Yeah. That's right. Kind of
that would go against their operating code.
Well, I've worked for, you know, several different groups in the government, and I don't see anything. I don't think I've worked for any one group, and that includes the agency that has like the technical and the organizational capability of building this like evil cabal. On the other hand, what I see is people that are uninformed at the top that think, hey, here's a great way to go about changing things for the better, and that generally equates to some form of communism. And then all the leadership under them, or management, however you want to look at it, interpreting that as like, well, we can't do this, we can't do that, and then it just trickles down, and that's where people get frustrated. Back to the police scenario. If you know you've been at a police department and you see it unravel like that to the point where, hey, I'm not going to be backed up if I take any pro action on fighting crime, I'm going to get screwed, and so why should I be here? I'm going to leave. This begs the question: who's left behind in that department? The yes man who's not going to question anything, and they're not going to do anything and collect a paycheck?
Patrick, do you happen to remember down there, you brought up New Orleans during the hurricane down there, when they had a whole precinct that was held up in that hotel, and they were out committing crimes? Yeah,
that's what you get. You know? I mean, so, you know, it's just I mean, these are all possibilities. Human nature, especially when you throw chaos into the mix, and we've all seen it on deployments. I've seen it at home too, during law enforcement operations and different things. People's mind just goes to complete shit, and that bad side of human nature, the selfishness, I'm going to get mine, I'm going to get out of here, I'm going to leave, I don't care what happens, I'm going to run people over, all that stuff kicks in, and it's not good. So I was glad that you brought up the concept of like, hey, take a step back, take a breath, watch, let things develop in front of you before you make some kind of rash, uninformed, panic decision.
Yeah, let me jump in, and before I toss it back up to Blake and Mark, a bunch of these natural disaster areas that I've had to go in as a senior project manager, when you roll in there, you got to roll in heavy, because you're not going to have any communication. all the cell towers are down, all the stores are gone. You've got to roll in there with everything that you need, and that's training for that preparation, because the better prepared you are, the more time that you have to sit back and evaluate without becoming chaotic. When I was down in Killeen, Texas, when the ice storm hit down there a couple years ago, my God, no gas. Everything was a sheet of ice. Nobody could drive. There was no gas. There was no propane. The Walmarts were wiped out. The stores were wiped out. And it was 5 days of ice. All the water started breaking. It was nobody had thought down in Texas they were going to have to deal with something like that. So the better prepared you are, the more you have your supplies set up, gives you that longer time to evaluate and sit back and watch how things are developing. You're not in a panic.
Yeah. Well, from a shooting, physical fitness or physical defense, personal defense perspective, bringing it back to you, Clint, again, not arguing, I'm agreeing. I think the way to add to it, a slightly different way of saying it that I think you and Patrick will have fun bantering back and forth is, opportunity is time plus distance, right? And you could say, well, time is distance. Well, no, because, if there's only 5 feet separating us, but I can put a table between us, well, that's also giving me more time. But I need that time and I need that distance away from that problem. And that gives me more opportunity, kind of what you just said, right? That gives me that 2 seconds to take a breath, that day or two to collect my thoughts and formulate my game plan back on that natural disaster, and also even just on a physical disaster or a physical threat. Clint, Patrick?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I mean, we talked about in my old job, time, space, and availability, right? I probably need to get a belt.
Space, distance. You could say to space or distance. Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
But in this realm, I think that one of the things that I think is severely lacking, I don't want to detract from this, but one thing that's lacking is people not having opportunities to be involved in the stuff that like Clint and I were just talking about, like helping during disasters. I would recommend if you, work whatever job you work in, if you volunteer to either work for Red Cross or sign up for Team Rubicon, you will get some, experience pretty quick, and you'll see how that stuff is run. And all that's valuable to you and your own family, in the long run, because you start to see these things, and then you cannot, discard. Hey, if these people would have had, generators, they would have had extra water, they would have had, backup shelters and tents and whatever, warm, heaters and stuff like that. Maybe it wouldn't have been so bad. So it's a natural, carryover to your personal life. Like, hey, I better have some of that stuff, depending on wherever you live, right?
Food, fire, water, shelter, shoot, move, communicate, medicate.
Yep.
That seems to be the core.
No, I agree. And then when you sit back and you think, wow, boy, everything comes in here and it's all wiped out and everything, your whole life is gone. You're waiting for FEMA to roll in there and start writing the checks. And I'll tell you what, I never saw some people so angry up there in Hazard County up in Kentucky when they got about, $1,500 for their entire life. Mm-hmm. There wasn't any money. I still drive through Lake Charles down there, going into Texas, and almost the top of every house still has a blue tarp on it. And it's been years since the hurricane hit
almost
down.
20 years. Imagine that.
Yep. You still drive there. You go down to New Orleans will put you on your heels. I mean, there are fields, football field after football field of rusted out cars, dumps, that are still just piled up down there. It looks post-apocalyptic on the northeast side of New Orleans. When you ride in there, it's amazing. It's still, most of these people, these cities do not recover. They don't recover.
Well, because we're doing such a good job, financially, our national debt, our social. Hey, and so just on that note, don't worry, you'll have access to your Social Security when your time is due.
Yep.
Medicaid, that's all going to be there for you, boys and girls.
Yep.
Your government's got their shit together.
Well, hey, Mark, on that note, if this is another thing too, we generally tend to look at the federal government for the solution and everything. Local, municipal governments and county governments, they play a big role in this stuff too. And if they're not ready for it and they don't file the correct paperwork, or they didn't have the resources or request the resources in time, the likelihood of them getting, whatever that situation is deemed, a disaster area, which allows them to be eligible for FEMA funds, that starts going lower. So some of this stuff comes down to local leadership as well. One thing I've seen in a couple places that had like really, really bad flooding, their municipal government didn't do that. And as a follow-up, I think it was FEMA or some county emergency management agency came in, and they brought in the Small Business Loan Association to give people like low interest loans on, basically fixing and repairing, large portions of their home. I mean, that's not the best solution, but it's better than nothing. But yeah, getting in touch and knowing who's in charge of your local government, learning kind of like we talked about before. Hey, what is our emergency operation plan? What's our emergency action plan? Are all these little groups in in our local government, to include like streets and sanitation or public works or whatever they're called wherever you live? Do they have plans if these things start happening? Because even clearing debris off roadways, I mean, that's a huge thing, because if you're going to get resources in there, they need to have a way to get them in there. And if these have never been even discussed at the local level, likelihood of it occurring in a crisis is pretty low.
Clint, you want to add to that? I'm smiling about something, but
no, he's exactly right. And as I'll circle around back to it again, being a project manager for these camps that they bring in, and you have to have money, because there's a lot of companies that come in there and do disaster relief, and I was surprised because in some of these states, down in Fort Myers, Florida, I was down there for the hurricane, the floods, these different things. You get to meet the emergency management people come up in there, and you get business cards. Those people exist, and they have the accounts, and they can get things paid for, that's county, state, so if there is a way to get aid in there, but you got to know how to get at that money.
My smile and bringing this over to Blake is, but when your state, your city, your county, your municipality has spent more time looking at DEI or other bullshit things, as opposed to just something like what you guys just said. Hey, do we even have a plan to get the trees off the road? Type of shit. Blake and I live in northern Minnesota. Man, they haven't salted and sanded, the road, just like it's just gone to shit over the last 10, 12 years. It's like you need to have really good winter tires and a 4-wheel drive. And even then you're still got a good chance of going in the ditch or digging yourself out. Remember, just on that note, it was about 3 years ago, there's only a handful, these big trucks, plow trucks with sand and everything. And, I'm out in the country, and here's 2 of them bullshitting with each other at a major intersection, out in the country roads. And, there was room, and I rolled up. I'm like, and I made the typical joke about, Department of Transportation people, both of them just sitting there as opposed to doing their jobs. And they were pissed off. And they're like, no, they got us both doing the same route today. So to Patrick's point, if you don't have people who know what the F they're doing, or haven't planned it, or haven't thought it through, and haven't, tabletopped it, you get the 2 out of your 4 trucks plowing the same fucking road all day long. One road out of your 10 roads you got to plow. So how's that going to work out for you in a crisis? Especially, and then just add to my thing. Once that crisis starts involving lead and screaming and bleeding people and casualties, watch that. We'll see about that crisis management at that point in time.
I'll say something, and I'll let Blake follow up on this one. You have this collective consciousness right now when you're moving around in society, and this may be a little harsh, but you can see people are tired, and a lot of them got a cop of shit attitude towards each other right off the bat because they're exhausted. They're exhausted with, their dollars being squandered. They're tired, being lied to. And then when they need something, everything that they've worked for and paid for, there's nothing to come in and help them. And boy, do people get, the tempers are getting short. You can see it every single day you're moving around.
Oh, 100%. And it's on little things, about little things. And it's, my granddad used to say it wasn't about the steak, I'm not pissed that the steak was medium instead of medium rare. I was pissed because the day, right before, I just got my balls kicked all day long. And that's the thing, is you're starting to have that mission creep where everybody's got a friggin' hair trigger. Everybody knows there's something right around the corner that's ready to pop them on the chin, because we've been popped again and again and again recently. And it's happening more and more frequently. And, talking about, Mark, like you're joking around about our lovely infrastructure in northern Minnesota, and especially that road between us. The potholes are terrible now. It's falling apart. It's these legacy systems, these systems that our forebears had built and planned on us being able to maintain so we could continue to develop and expand and grow as a nation. They're not being maintained anymore. The education in the field is not being passed down from the previous generation, because it is a DEI hire, and it's not about having someone that's capable of, maintaining the hydroelectric dam. It's having somebody that's capable about talking about how hydroelectric dams keep another group down, or whatever. That's a really out there sort of thing, but it's the accuracy, because what we're seeing is this dumbing down of our quality of a meritocratic society. And because of that, long-term ramifications and cascade events where everything is breaking down because it cannot be maintained anymore. And then on top of that, with everyone being pissed, dude, this is ripe as a powder keg. We are currently living in a powder keg.
Well, boys, we're at an hour. Patrick and Clint, obviously you guys, final comments, take us, go wherever you want. We'll bring it back over to Blake, but, I'm not sure what we'll talk about next week, or we'll just see if there's even a fucking country come next week. I mean, it's already been alluded to. No one in your media, no one in your government wants to even tell you about attempted assassinations against a political, opponent to the current administration. Again, this list is so long. I feel exhausted. I just can't, I can't, if you can't see it, I don't know what to say. So for me, on a personal note, it's, just because when Rome collapsed, it didn't mean all the citizens died. We're not all going to die tomorrow. We're going to have to figure this out, and you're going to have to figure out how you're going to stay alive, keep your business going, whatever it is, and then you're going to have to be making some harsh decisions about whether you're going to, put up with the bullshit or go along with it and just be another, brown shirt, Gestapo person. So on that note, I'll bring it over to Clint, Patrick, and Blake.
Go ahead, Pat.
Okay. So, I mean, if you guys, all the listeners, if you haven't listened to some of these stories, and again, this isn't not just like griping and moaning. These are things that I've experienced, Clint's experienced, Mark and Blake. We've all seen this stuff, and I'm sure you've probably seen your own examples of this and maybe lived through some of it. It's time for us to start taking care of ourselves and being self-reliant. I mean, that's what it boils down to. You know what? Get the extra water, buy the generator, have the extra blankets, get heaters, have, alternate avenues of what we call egress. Like, hey, if I have to get the hell out of here and the highway is going to be jammed, what are some alternate routes I can take? Because if you're so used to staring at, Google Maps or whatever, Apple Maps, and that's your primary way of navigating, start looking at the actual, hard map and figure out, hey, how do I get out of here? Can I take some side state road or something? Or can I take a farm road? How do we get out of here, and where are we going? Start looking at that stuff. Also, from a psychological standpoint, you know what? This is one of those, almost like to, call it like an underdog type moment. Americans usually kind of thrive in that, right? So, in sports, we like to watch the underdog and, come from behind, the Miracle on Ice 1980. Everybody loves that. Well, we're those people now. If things are stacked against us, so let's buck up, start preparing, and if the situation occurs, let's rise to the occasion. But it starts well in advance of that happening. So I'll end my thing with saying, hey, look, if you love America, I love you. So let's bring everybody together and start rebuilding the country on our own. We don't need a politician to do that for us. We can do it on our own.
Unless we lose this next election.
Well, then it's really going to be on us. That's why I say that.
Clint, sir.
Yeah, as Patrick was saying that, I reflect back to being a little bit of a fan of The Walking Dead at the beginning before it got real soap opera-y. I think that was kind of, for people, it was kind of a glimpse for them to sit and evaluate themselves and think, am I a biter? Am I a villain? Or am I a good guy that's got to do bad things sometimes? You're kind of literally looking at that going, okay, I see this. I want to see how they present this to me, because where am I in this? How am I going to be in this situation? And I think for me, I've, like I said, I've always lived, most of my adult life in the military or some kind of disaster relief or teaching tactics and shooting or something like that. So I feel my comfort zone is my head on a swivel. I feel comfortable there. I'm not a chew the cud person that just buries my head in the sand. I pay attention, but I also like to treat people with respect. I like to treat people the way I want to be treated, but you got to be, again, going back to being prepared, so you have that ability to relax, evaluate, because you're not in a panic. I think that's my message, is to take the time, sit down, take stock in what you're doing, so you're prepared for yourself, your family, and your loved ones, so you can think things out and do the right thing.
Blake, for your kind of final, if you don't mind, we normally don't address the questions too much here, but AVV has two questions that I think are right up your kind of alley. One was, what about, can a small country, can a unified town in the country, a rural town, can it resist the hordes? And Clint just got me thinking about, and he was talking about, Walking Dead, he's talking about the zombies, fleeing the cities. And then his final comment of, for everybody really, like, do you think we can pull together as a country like we did during 9/11, or are those days over? Well, actually, why don't all you guys jump in but Blake, I think the Minnesota thing, obviously that's kind of up our alley. You want to answer that one?
Sure. Well, as far as if the quote unquote unwashed hordes come pillaging out of the cities, right? Like, it depends on what time of year it is. Depends on how far they're even going to make it north. If something bad happens during the election cycle, things are already cold. Nights could be getting really cold, and you start seeing 10, 15, 50,000 people fleeing on a major road, and you see rape and murder and theft happen like crazy, and people freezing to death in the ditch because they're not prepared for the supply. So it depends on what time of year it is. We have a huge natural barrier to consider. But let's say they do make it to that northern city. A lot of these towns aren't much bigger than about 500 people. Some of them are up to 900,000 people. You'd have to have a pretty tight-knit town to be able to actually try to hold out against. And then the question is what do you mean by hold out against? Is it people just trying to come in because they're battered, broken, and hungry, and you got to try to help? But in the same thing is, like you were saying, Clint, good people having to make bad decisions. Well, do you feed the needy there, the 10,000 people that just showed up at your front door, and you can feed them for a day, or do you keep your doors locked and you keep your people safe for a year? This is a brutal arithmetic that's going to have to take place. If we're really going to that level where things have truly, truly collapsed, there's some very, very hard decisions that are going to have to be made, and there are no good answers to them. As far as getting back, though, to that cultural homogeny that we had when the towers fell, that was a watershed moment in my lifetime. I can remember where I was, as I'm sure all of you can, very, very specifically remember the events that unfolded during that day, and the sheer, because it was the patriotism that was shared by all in our nation for quite a long time thereafter. I'm afraid to get back to that level of unity, there has to be something as shocking like that happens to us. But then
this isn't, these last 4, 8, 12 years haven't been shocking enough.
And that's just it. And then we are all growing numb to, holy crap, our former president just had assassinated. Wait, a second one. Oh, wait, now we're hearing reports of a third one. We've become numb to that. So then the question is what is that event? And if that event does take place, well, where do you point the country? Who's has power has a tremendous amount of power behind a nation that's actually unified and furious again, especially in this day and age. So I don't know, man. I don't want to sound black-pilled about everything because it's not. You know, where's the bomb going to find you? Is it going to find you at the pub drinking a beer and playing darts, or at church with your family, or a barbecue, or is it going to find you concerned in front of your computer constantly complaining? You know, I'd like to think it's the former, that we try to go out and we do the best we can with the time we have remaining. But I also think that we have to take the pragmatic approach and be aware of what's coming. So,
Patrick, Clint, you guys got a comment? Where do you guys think we're going to be? Think we can get there again?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, well, I don't know in large numbers. I like to, I liked the AVV question about like small communities. You know, I liken this to being in the military, right? So like if you were part of some division, you could say, hey, that's cool. I'm super proud to be part of this division. But more likely than not, you were down to like the platoon or company level, like smaller groups, because you had your own subculture within that and you were proud of it, right? And I've seen that with different communities. If you know they've suffered a hurricane or a tornado or something like that, once they rebuild and they all come together to do it, there's that shared suffering, and then overcoming it creates that pride. You know, military is, you know, it's always been that way because we'll create our own shared suffering, right? We don't need a war for that.
What drill sergeants are for.
Yeah, right. So you can do that. I think smaller communities and like rural communities, I think that they first of all, they have all my respect because there's a lot of farmers and agricultural workers out there. They have a better chance of building that esprit de corps together than a larger city, right? So but that's a model I think we should all follow, is trying to build that and just bringing people together.
Okay, I'll jump on that. So there was also, to go back to the movie thing again, there used to be a series on called Jericho. I don't know if anybody remembers that one, but this was kind of along those lines. Little town that was kind of off by its side, but they were dealing with people roaming through there and coming in trying to take their supplies, things like that. It was kind of interesting. And the other one, Red Dawn, you don't know exactly how this thing is going to get split up, what kind of guerrilla warfare, unconventional warfare, urban opposed to rural it's going to be. On the question of coming back together, God, man, you would think at this point, as much as we've been lied to, that everybody would be coming together going, I'm getting sick of this. They're depleting our strategic oil reserves. The dollar is being collapsed and being dropped as a petrodollar. This was, something that people have been talking about for many, many years, losing the petrodollar. We're there. So, I mean, it's going to get bad here. I don't know what would bring everybody together right now. I mean, the country's been flooded with illegals. I mean, the interest rates are out of control, inflation. What is going to pull us together? I don't know.
It'll probably be a story time hour where we go ahead and disfigure, 10-year-old children. That'll bring us together.
Powwow, right?
Yeah. Blake, comments and take us out, my good man.
Man,
and before you do that, though, Patrick, Clint, as always, thank you guys. I mean, that was some really good. I hope people, when they watch us, whether they're live or whatever, again, you can only lead a horse to water. You can't make him drink. But man, I hope people are picking this up. Plain and simple. So, but thanks to you guys for again taking time out of your days, and sharing your experiences and thoughts with us. Always appreciated.
Absolutely, gentlemen. We do appreciate it. And as far as final thoughts go, just keep trying to build community. Just try to get prepared. But we are in that home stretch right now. What is it, under 40 days now until the election? Was it 37 or something like that? It's ridiculously right around the corner. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a major moment one way or the other. We are going to see massive ramifications for it. So I'd say focus on what you can with what time you have available. Try to take a little step forward every single day and spend time with your loved ones. So, I mean, honestly, I don't really have much more to say than that. Just try to enjoy what you can as best as you can and be as ready as you can be. No.
36 days.
36, man. It's going to be here like that.
Oh, yeah.
No. Well, God bless everyone tonight. Keep your head on.
Clint wanted to say one more thing.
Oh, please do.
I just hope we don't have to live through people pulling out boxes from under tables. And, I just wish the election could be, and we know everything is going to be in play. Every trick is going to be in play. And it's a fork in the road, and they both look scary down both roads.
Yeah.
Right on. Blake.
And I don't really have much more than that. It is going to be scary. Just keep focused, try your best, and fight. Oh,
rock and roll. All right. Well, hey, everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for, leaving comments here in the live. If you watch us on demand, leave comments in there as well. If you want to hear about specific topics or, conversations or whatever, obviously let us know. But, really for the next, 30 some days, for what it's worth from this knucklehead right here, but you better keep your powder dry and you better be serious. I mean, and as Clint said, head on a swivel. And as Patrick said, in an emergency, you are your own first responder, boys and girls. So tough times coming ahead. And as Clint said, no matter what, there's a fork in the road. One we'll have to fight our way out of, and the other one is still going to be a fight, and it's still going to be a struggle. We ain't anywhere close to getting no one's even talking about the economy anymore. And like that national debt is going to kill us. They're going to go to, I can clearly see evil bringing us into a major conflict just so they can get rid of the debt. Doesn't matter how many millions of people they have to kill to do it, but that national debt is about to sink us big time. So,
yep.
Blake, I kind of mumbled for a second. All right, now take us out.
Man, I guess again, keep your head on a swivel, keep focused, bring your family together, your friends together. Just try to educate as many people as you can and be prepared for what's coming, because I do think we're in the home stretch of at least this chapter right now. Doesn't mean it's the end of the day. Doesn't mean we lose the fight. It just means we're starting that next one, and let's get up and dust ourselves off and keep moving forward.
That's right. All right. Amen. All right, everybody, leave us comments, questions, thanks for watching. Again, huge hats off and shout out to Clint and Patrick for taking the time out of their busy lives to join us, and just Godspeed, and everybody, keep thinking, keep moving, never quit. We'll see you next week. All right, everybody. I don't know. We got anything, Blake? Did we do a woo or anything at the end? Woo! Halloween's right around the corner too. Let's make it scary. Woo! All right, we'll talk to you guys next week. Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks now.